Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the podcast formerly known as 100 Yards of Podcast. We are here. I'm Marshall. Omar here. We got a few juicy topics for you today. We got a little bit of talk on Navy. We're going to bring in some advanced analytics for you. What? Proprietary analytics in this? Okay. Then we're going to transition over. We got some interesting group of five New Year's Six kind of topics, and then we'll round it all out. We got Omar here. He's gonna speak on some San Jose State nonsense. So let's dive right into it.
Not nonsense. But yeah, so we're talking about advanced analytics. Well, first off, I want to thank Connor McQuiston for getting his Twitter tag right now. I'm sorry, but I'll have it in the comments on Spotify and YouTube.
Yeah, I'll pull it up right here for you real quick.
Oh, sweet, man. But so it all started with a joke on Twitter about the Illinois game this past weekend where Illinois punted on 4th and goal, peak Big Ten football. And I made a joke about comparing that to past relationships I've attempted to make with women, and he replied. So I thought, you know what? We're doing this project on Navy's quarterback play, and advanced analytics would definitely help. Let me slide in those DMs. And he answered. So hopefully we can get Connor on the show. We got a project next week looking at Tulane's, the evolution of Tulane's offense, because it's quite interesting, honestly. But I want to thank Connor McQuiston. And Marshall, did you get his Twitter tag pulled up?
So it's at Connor with one N. So CONORMCQ5. Connor Nick Q5.
And we'll have that typed out in the comments so Connor gets his due, man, because he's a lifesaver for this. Because the advanced analytics, I try to do my best with simple math, but I can't do the algorithms and like Excel stuff that he can. All I do is like enter cells, divide them, and add them up. Like that's all I can do. But so starting off, looking at this Navy team, so America was introduced to the 2020 Navy team in pretty surprise fashion with a 55-3 loss to BYU on college football's Monday night edition of Monday Night Football, the Labor Day night game, and from there it's been an up and down trajectory for the midshipmen, where they had the comeback victory against Tulane in Tulane's first ABC appearance since 1980. Way to spoil the party for the Green Wave. But the offense has just been really a disappointment compared to like the Navy offenses of the past. And we saw last year what they can do with Malcolm Perry becoming the first quarterback to run for 2,000 yards in the season. Everyone knows about Keenan Reynolds holding the touchdown record. Even Ricky Dobbs, when I was a kid, like 11 or 9 or 10 and 11, when he had the original quarterback rushing touchdown record for a season. Navy's option offense and quarterback play has been golden throughout its time, even in off years too. But this year it's different, and we got some numbers as we mentioned earlier. So here's the basic numbers that we have. So Navy's quarterbacks, if you account for sacks, which is kind of frustrating that the NCAA does this because sacks are not run plays, but whatever, that's a different time. They have 106 carries for 136 yards, and I've not looked at the yards per carry in terms of without sacks, but that's a little bit over 1 yard per carry. Definitely not 2 yards per carry. If you take away the sacks, which I have calculated, they have 91 non-sack attempts for 216 yards for average yards per carry of 2.37. Absolutely putrid for any option offense. You go to the opportunity rates, and some of these advanced metrics we'll walk you through, but opportunity rates are the percentage, pretty basically the percentage of carries that exceed 5 yards. Simple measure of efficiency. You look at their opportunity rates, in 93 non-sack carries, they have, 22 carries of more than 5 yards. That is it, 22 carries for an opportunity rate of 0.236%. Now you go to success rate, which is another basic measure, kind of harder to calculate because it looks at the percentage of the first down yardage. If it's 50% on first down, you get 50% of the first down yardage. That's a successful play. You get 70% from where you're at on second down, another successful play, and 100% on third and fourth down is a success. So if you look at that measure, they've only had 21 successful carries out of those 93 for a total of 0.225%. So 22.5%. Just really, really bad. And mainly you look at their starting quarterback, Dalen Morris, is pretty much had the most playing time. And he just hasn't looked like a fit in the offense. Looking at their last game against SMU, They hardly ran any option plays. They ran things that Navy just doesn't do. Navy's a fullback and quarterback-driven offense. They're running wingback dives, wingback toss plays, and that's just not what they do. But Dalen Morris, in 57 carries this year, he has 9 carries of 5+ yards. When you factor in sacks, he has 66 carries for 54 yards. And in terms of non-sack yardage, he has 57 carries for 95 yards for, again, less than 1 yard per carry, less than 2 yards per carry, and then less than 1 yard per carry in total. So a really huge year. But I think the most telling stat is the advanced metrics that our friend Connor gave us here, which show that the estimated points on average, I think that's what it stands for, estimated points on average.
Expected points added is EPA. Yeah.
Okay. And yeah, Marshall, do you care to walk us through that stat? Because,
Sure. So if you think about like every play from a scoring perspective, right? So over the course of the game, let's say, your team scores 24 points in the game, right? An easy way to kind of think about how you might break that up is you might say, okay, on average, then in each quarter we scored 6 points, right? And so then maybe you could divide it out further and say on a per play basis, say there was 6 plays in that quarter, each play was then worth 1 point, right? So that's like a very kind of dumb way to think about it. So the way EPA will end up working is it takes the expected probability, the expected points. So expected points is kind of like a predictive metric. And so the way to think about this is going to be each play at the beginning of the play has an average amount of points that kind of will be added, right, to the game. So each play, you're going to kind of progress towards scoring points ideally. And so EPA per play is going to be the difference in the beginning of the play's expected points added and the end of the play's expected points added. And the way this kind of is helpful is because if you take this expected point number and then you attribute it to whatever player was involved on that play, you're able to attribute that player their difference in the score, essentially. And so it's really kind of a way to think about how you shimmy up the points you've scored in the game or that you expect to score in the game based on what you've done in the past, and attribute them to different players so you can kind of see how each facet of your game and each player individually is going to be contributing to that overall score line.
Yeah, so I think that's a very detailed explanation. To add to that, what Connor put in his own words, to put for a layman like myself, I'm a history major, not really into this stuff. He said, quote unquote, if you get the ball after the kickoff at your own 25, that's around 1.5 expected points. So on average, teams from that get a score 1.5 points on average from that position. If you gain 15 yards, you're on your own 40, and that is 2 expected points because teams on average from that position score 2 points. So the EPA in that play would be 0.5 points because the offense is now expected to score 0.5 more points. So simple subtraction. I mean, that's what helped me a lot with it. So if you look at the trick, do you have anything to add to that, Marshall?
No, I was just saying, yeah, that's a way more simple version. I was reading wrote up a few glossary kind of terms on just to make sure I had it right. That breaks it down much better than I did.
Yeah, I mean, all these nerd terms. I mean, I can't.
Connor's the lifesaver right there.
Yeah, Connor's our lifesaver. I hope to get him on the show. But looking at the EPA, in total, Navy's quarterback in EPA is negative 45.619. Absolutely horrible. With Dalen Morris, the starting quarterback for most of their games, having an EPA of negative 27.6. You compare that to Army, which I forgot to compare the basic stats, but at the very basic, Army's quarterbacks, and they've gone through 6. We've gone through 6 quarterbacks this year. Pretty insane. We have 145 non-sack carries for 780 total yards for a 5.379 yards per carry. Our EPA is a bit low at negative 2.977, but I think a lot of that is the fact that we played Cincinnati, pretty much one of the best defenses in the country, and underperformed in a couple games too, such as the Citadel game. But the difference is stark. I mean, similar circumstances with the cycling of quarterbacks. Navy's played 5 quarterbacks. At one point, they had 3 quarterbacks in 3 games. Really, really wild. But But I mean, Marshall, do you have any like explanation for this? I mean, they to go 1 year from the great Malcolm Perry to the absolute low points. Like, in fact, if we're doing this for perspective, in the option era, so Navy started running some semblance of the triple option in '95 when Charlie Weatherby took over. Absolutely smart move. They went to a bowl in '96 after. But their worst year in the option era was in 2000, and there's not accurate play-by-play data or sack yardage data. So all we have is just all the totals in general. And they had 254 carries for 663 yards at a clip of 2.6 yards per carry. But that's still over 50 yards a game. Like, that's way better than what Navy's doing at the moment. And in general, this is the worst year for quarterbacks in Navy running the ball since '94 when they ran a pass offense, pro-style offense, believe it or not, and averaged 55 yards a game as a team running the ball. And their quarterback, Kubiak, I'm sure most of this is sack yardage, but he had 64 carries for over negative 200 yards. That's, for perspective, that's how bad it's gotten. But I mean, do you have any explanation for this, Marshall? Like, this is really a mystery. I mean, I don't know what to say about this.
Yeah, I mean, you can kind of think about trying to isolate the different like variables at play here. Like, okay, so the quarterback changes, like from Malcolm Perry, for instance, right? And so I guess you could try to attribute some of it to quarterback play. But I mean, I think it'd probably be too simple to do that. Like, when you look at what it takes to like run the ball, you need to have like, your offensive line needs to be doing some work. Like, you need to be playing a defense that's, like, if you're, like you said earlier, like if you're playing a Cincinnati, your outcome is probably going to be worse than if you're playing like Rice, So it's like there's a lot of factors at play. Overall, I would say to have such a drastic negative change, it probably is going to be a multitude of those factors. So I wish I kind of like looked at it right now, but if you had like turnover on the line, I'd be interested to see, like, besides just like turnover at the quarterback position, like perhaps if there was any like coaching changes. Like, I have no idea though. Like, what are you thinking at all?
So, I mean, I've heard some things. There's been some buzz on Service Academy football Twitter where Navy's had a ton of players enter the transfer portal in the past couple of years because the opportunities are elsewhere. I mean, you even look at this year, in this very situation with their quarterbacks, Perry Olson, who showed flashes of efficiency and solidness. He entered the transfer portal after the BYU game. Like, Navy's kind of got some retention problems, it looks like. Another thing that people tend to point to in times like this is the whole cop-out argument that Navy doesn't belong in a conference, which, I mean, listen, like, I go to West Point, I respect him. I respect Navy, and that's just a cop-out. Like, they don't belong in the American because of one bad year. Like, that happened in 2018 when they went 3-10. They're like, the toll of the American Athletic Conference play is it's waning on them. When you look at their slates as an independent, I think they had the most Power 5 wins from like a certain span. I think it was when Paul Johnson took over in 2002 until they joined the American. They had the most Power 5 wins by a non-Power 5. I think that's a total cop-out argument. But in terms of that, like, I really, it's weird because you want to think they recruit players that can like play to their scheme. I mean, especially in the option. You want to think that, but this is just bad. Like, there's like, what is there to say?
No, I mean, they're gonna have to do something to like overcome that. Like, I mean, it seems like you can't really stop the bleeding at this point. Like, this is gonna have to be some kind of like off-season thing they're gonna have to address. It's just, I mean, it's a mess. Like, when you think about it from that like EPA perspective, it's like, so with it being like what, negative 45 and then like negative 23, like for that one quarterback, it's like, if you think about that, like over the course of the season so far, like their quarterbacks have contributed negative 45 points like to their offense. Like, that's just mind blowing. Like, that's horrible. I don't even know what to say.
I'm like you look at just like the way that they've sort of like played the offense. Like, the most I've seen of Navy is the BYU game, of course, and the SMU game. SMU, there was hardly any option plays. Like, the quarterbacks in general in that game, and I mean, granted they were behind, but they had 4 carries the whole game. Quarterbacks only had four non-sack carries, and it's just like, what is going on? Like, this is not option football. It's really crazy. I mean, hopefully. So Army football is better when Navy's competitive because the Army-Navy game is on such a pedestal each year. This year's a bit different because there's plenty of games on this pandemic slate. So, I mean, it'll receive less attention. I don't think it can compete with Michigan, Ohio State. I mean, as much as I'd like to think, but yeah, it's better. Like, because what's better than having, like, I guess, two very solid academy teams in the only game of the year? That's really good for service academy football. But honestly, this is just it's bad. Like, and it's like there's not much to point to. Like in 2018 when they went 3-10, they got off to a bad start because they wanted to run Malcolm Perry like a wildcat quarterback, which is what they did in the 2017 Army-Navy game. And he ran wild against Army. Like, he just pretty much ran shotgun sweeps with Malcolm Perry my freshman year. And they try to do that, and teams, like, they caught on to it. So but in this case, there's no explanation for it. They're just really, I mean, that I can think of. But, I mean, I think we've this will be something to look forward to, or I guess look towards in the remaining two games that Navy has, because they had their last two games postponed. I don't think they're going to be played again because they have the Army-Navy game on the 12th. But we'll just have to see. So moving on to our next topic, though, I know Marshall hinted at some San Jose State hype for the first time since 1982. And the #1 hit song, as I mentioned in the article I posted on the Borja Report, the #1 hit song at that time was Abracadabra, a little Steve Miller band.
Woo!
Good song, man. Good song. But for the first time since 82, San Jose State is 3-0, and they're looking like a front runner, at least in the Mountain West Western Division, because you look at that division, it's kind of wide open. Hawaii looked strong week 1 against Fresno State. Then they faltered the next week against Wyoming in the cold, in absolutely cold weather. Then they again showed some vulnerabilities against UNM this past weekend, only winning 39-33, but being behind most of the game. You look at Fresno State, again, like I mentioned, lost to Hawaii. San Diego State lost to San Jose State. So San Jose State is a front runner. The only other team in the West that hasn't looked vulnerable is Nevada, but we don't really know that much about Nevada because they only have an overtime win against Wyoming and wins against UNLV and Utah State, who fired Gary Anderson. In the Boise State, of course, is the front runner. You know, some people thought Air Force might have snuck up on them, but Air Force is 1-1 with 2 postponed games. But they lost to that San Jose State team. San Jose State shut down the option, held them to 6 points. So I know it's a long shot, Marshall. I know that the Mountain West started late. But do you think that San Jose State, like, what do you think has to happen for San Jose State to ride the New Year's Six train?
Hey, sorry about that, Omar. You just cut out for me for the last 10 seconds. Can you just rehash that really quick?
Yeah, no. I was just saying, like, what do you think? I know the odds are long because the Mountain West started late, but what do you think has to happen for San Jose State to the New Year's Six train or even be in the conversation?
Well, they're gonna need a little bit of that abracadabra magic. I'll play that. I think. I mean, it's like you said, like their conference, their schedule coming up, like they're definitely going to need Boise State to win out, like just look super strong, and then they're going to need to beat them, and that's going to have to be their resume win. Like assuming like a Nevada doesn't surprise you. But then they're also just going to need a bunch of teams to lose. I think like they're going to need like out of conference help. Like who are our other front runners right now? Like we have some big names up there,
Yeah.
It's like, you're thinking you're like what BYU's, your Cincinnati's, like even, a Marshall, a Coastal Carolina, a Liberty dude might be above them. Like not might be. I think a Liberty is strongly probably above them at this point. So they're gonna need. They got to. It's kind of a rough draw though, because they started their season a little bit later than a lot of the other teams, a lot of the other conferences, I should say. So they're gonna need some of those conferences almost to lose to let them catch up. So I'm not as sold on their probability of getting in, but not really on their own sake. Like the Mountain West probably isn't doing them any favors with their kind of like weak conference this year. So they're going to need some help, a lot of help.
I mean, I agree with that. Yeah, like we love a feel-good story. We love it. But on your point, well, a little point of clarification. So BYU and Liberty have to crack the top 12 since they're independents. I think it's a really shady rule that they're not part of the group of 5, but it is what it is. But even then, like you said, a lot of teams have to lose. Like, I mean, in that case, I think SMU, I think has to lose a couple games, or whoever whoever wins the American West has to like show like 2 or 3 losses in the conference title game, and then upset Cincinnati somehow, which I don't see happening. You mentioned Liberty or Coastal Carolina. I mean, but do you have a counterpoint for that, or?
Well, I was just thinking about it. An interesting scenario. What do you think about if San Jose State is able to beat Boise State by a larger margin than BYU beat?
I mean, if their only losses are to BYU and San Jose State, then I think that could turn some heads. But I just think the West Coast bias is like implicit, like it's implied, and everyone knows about Zach Wilson, who, I mean, Mormon Manziel, as people call him. Everyone knows about him. Like, the glamour is there for them as a West Coast team. It's just not there for San Jose State. Like, you know, I think the West Coast bias is too strong there in terms of that. They'll probably see it as Mountain West cannibalism, like the Mountain West cannibalizing itself, honestly.
You're probably right. Yeah.
I also think, like, the Sun Belt too. Like, people are forgetting about Louisiana. Like, Louisiana's still there. Like, it's like that Undertaker sneaking up, like, in the AP poll now again. Like, they got back in the AP poll, and they
who's their one loss to?
Coastal Carolina.
And therein lies the issue.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. Like, there's just so much, like, so many hurdles that have to happen. Like, so much, I wouldn't say parity, but there's so much contenders at the top, like worthy candidates in literally almost every conference except for the MAC. But I mean, we'll see as the MAC shapes up, but the MAC tends to be like the most competitive. Like last year, I think Central Michigan had like 4 or 5 losses as their conference champ. I don't know, I think Miami had 4 or 5 losses as their conference champ. Whoever won the conference championship wasn't like a great team, didn't have a great record. But it's like, the thing is, I mean, there aren't like the dominoes. There's too many dominoes to fall, like way too many, I think.
Yeah, I mean, this year's just been a fantastic year for like Group of 5 and independents, like to have a good shot at coming, into the New Year's Six, into like even just getting into the top 25. I feel like there's been a little bit more parity this year. So unfortunately, it's good from our perspective in that we like seeing a lot of these teams doing well, and we like to see a lot of them getting recognized. But I think it's probably bad from their individual perspective in that now they have less uniqueness that helps them to stand out and get to that podium where they want to be.
Yeah, I mean, I'd have to agree, but I think this could be like a building year for the Group of 5 in general. If like teams like San Jose State can show that it's just not just the brand names, it's not your UCF, it's not your Cincinnati, it's not your Boise State, but these other programs can have good years, and just like, because it's sort of like a 2-year theory, like you got to gain respect the first year, pay your dues and go to like the Peach Bowl or something, but not the playoff. And then the next year you can have a shot, but that you got disproved with UCF when they run 125 straight regular season games.
Omar, so Group of 5 teams and some of these independents, they started their season, correct me if I'm wrong, they started their season like a couple weeks earlier than the Power 5 conferences, yeah?
Yeah, everyone, the conferences that started late were the Pac-12 and the Big Ten and the MAC and Mountain West.
What about like from like compared to the like the Big 12 or like any of the other, like say for instance, like how did the Conference USA, compare to like the other states of those guys?
Conference USA is a mess because there's like teams that have played 8 games, like UTSA, and teams that only played 3 games, like FIU, or Rice has only played 2 games. So it's up and down, but there are a couple teams that have like played like straight through. Like UAB, I think they've only had like 1 postponement. Either 1 postponement, 1 or 2, but they've played from the start. Marshall's only playing like 8 games this year, which is pretty much like I know about CUSA.
Like, help me out here then, okay? So like what I'm thinking is, I wonder do you think it's possible that the reason there's been a little bit more recognition this year is because they could have, start with an extra week or 2 on some of these other conferences, they were able to get a little bit more eyeballs on their games, show a little bit more.
I think so. Yeah, that's good, because like the reason that Louisiana Lafayette became such a sensation early on was 2 reasons: a light slates in terms of like week to week, and exciting games that like drew people in those times, like the noon time slots, like it's generally a low key time slot, the noon time slot. But you have them winning in overtime on a game-winning like 50-plus yard field goal, beating Iowa State, who is leading the Big 12, I believe. They just had the exciting wins, and also there's like not many teams to rank in general as well at that point.
Yeah. I wonder then, I'd be like curious, I want to kind of go back after this and check then, like how some of the, like your Marshall, Coastal Carolina, Cincinnati, BYU, Liberty, how they kind of stack up in a proportion versus like past years. Because if it's a similar proportion, then that could be a very convincing argument for a lot of these like Group of 5 conferences or independents to maybe try and start their seasons, 2 weeks earlier than the other conferences, purely for the fact of getting those eyeballs. So maybe then they could continue to get that recognition in the future. That'd be an interesting proposal for their kind of commissioner to look at.
That's like, that'll take NCAA work, but I definitely think that's a great idea, because we saw like last year with week 0, how for seemingly no apparent reason, Miami and Florida got bumped up to week 0 when I think Hawaii and Arizona was supposed to be the only FBS game on that day, just because it was college football's sesquicentennial. But I'm sure like they can come up with a proposal, but the NCAA, it's horrible organization and they're incredibly biased. Like they'll penalize one team and that's not a brand name, and they'll be fair to another team that is a brand name. It's ridiculous, but that's definitely something that I think they could look into for sure, because I mean you had teams like Arkansas State on Big Noon Kickoff on Fox, getting the Fox Noon game and then upsetting Kansas State. Like, I mean that was a huge boost for conference. I mean, like,
yeah, I mean if anything, I think it would also, kind of bring in more money just to the NCAA overall. Like if you're getting think about if you're getting a TV contract that starts 2 weeks earlier, but then your big conferences are still running that normal duration. It's almost like you're adding 2 weeks in a sense to your slate in terms of money, like to those kinds of things. That would be interesting too. But
yeah,
who knows?
Sure. I totally agree. Yeah, like that's something that's interesting. I mean, totally, for sure. Yeah, it could benefit teams like Cincinnati, and I mean, who we'll get to, I guess, at this point now. So everyone knows about Notre Dame's huge win against Clemson, probably their biggest win since '93. That game of the century against Florida State, also on NBC, also at Notre Dame. Very coincidental. And you know who they played the week after? Boston College. Who do they play this week? Boston College, rocking the red bandana uniforms, man. Like I'm telling you, man. Like Boston College is. Sorry, brief aside. But Boston College.
They got the bandana uniforms going on.
Oh, please. Put that away. Put that away. Oh, my gosh. But Marshall, I mean, Boston College with red bandanas, they beat number 9 USC at home wearing them in a night game where Tyler Murphy, I think, had 190-plus rushing yards. It's absolutely ran wild. The next year, I think they lost that game against Clemson. I'll have to check. But they won in 2017 on a Friday night against Florida State. Just, like, whooped them 35-3. The year after, they beat Miami with the red bandanas. So, like, I mean, special things happen, when they wear the red bandana uniform. So, I'd look out. But back to the point, that the biggest loser was not Clemson of that game. The biggest loser was Cincinnati and possibly BYU. Because, I mean, everyone, like, with all the asterisks surrounding that game with Trevor Lawrence, even though Trevor Lawrence doesn't play defense, I mean, Trevor Lawrence couldn't have stopped Clemson from letting up 47 points. But people are going to point to Trevor Lawrence being gone as Clemson, just as Clemson letting Notre Dame, I guess, not really letting them, but just Notre Dame getting an easy one on Clemson. So it's going to take, I think, Notre Dame beating Clemson again in the ACC title game to get Cincinnati into the playoff. But even then, like, people are hyping Oregon as a playoff.
Bro, that doesn't even make sense to me. How much people are hyping Oregon. Like, I don't know if it's like some kind of like transitive hype because Justin Herbert's doing well now. Like it makes no. They played like one game now. Like it's like what?
I don't know. Like, and for me, I love the Pac-12 and I want the Pac-12 to get back to prominence, but not this year. Like this is not the year for that. Like I don't know. Similar. I mean, there's similar conference strengths between the American and the the Pac-12. Like Cincinnati would have wins against SMU, possibly twice. Memphis, who might get ranked. not sure if you heard that. That was a salute cannon. that cannon shot. But yeah, like Memphis too, who could get ranked by the end of the year if they keep winning. They have similar resumes. Plus, Cincinnati's got they got the power of a non-conference win against a strong Army team. Army continues to win out. So again, like the multiple hurdles, and that's just like another thing that Cincinnati did not need to have happen was Notre Dame winning. And as much as I support Notre Dame, as the way I describe Notre Dame is a history majors college football team. Because, they're so important for the history of college football, for its popularity in America. They're a piece of American culture, of the American cultural
Omar, can you let us know how many times you've watched Rudy?
I've watched Rudy at least like 5 times because, yeah, I've had a similar playing style of Rudy.
Omar, you don't have to be humble. You can tell us the true number.
I'm the 2016 Cleveland High School Football Heart Award winner. If that's what you need to know. I mean, that's all you need to know. But Notre Dame, like they have that fabric, and I rooted for them. But I mean, I honestly want a Group of 5 playoff team more than Notre Dame in the playoff, because I mean that's boring, honestly. I mean, it's not boring, but it's just such a boon for the sport. I think for them to have a Group of 5 team. But
so I guess what do you think is like the scenario where Notre Dame and Cincinnati get it? Like, do you think it has to be? Obviously, Notre Dame is going to have to beat Clemson again.
Yeah.
But beyond that, like if it's a close game, do you give the edge to Clemson still, or does it have to be like a convincing win in order to get Cincinnati to hop them?
I don't think you put in a 2-loss Power 5 team over a undefeated Cincinnati team with a strong non-conference win and good wins in conference, especially against SMU. It's like saying SMU, like, oh, they beat SMU twice. Does that mean anything? Like, if SMU runs a table against everyone but Cincinnati, I mean, heck yeah, that should mean something. So I think the scenario is Notre Dame or Clemson. The Clemson showed some major vulnerabilities against Boston College, and Boston College is a young team, so that's probably why they couldn't close that out. But they better watch out. Like Clemson, like they could show vulnerable against. I have to look at their schedule, but just depends. I'm sure there's like hurdles along the way.
Who is that? Say that again. I'll pull it up.
Just Clemson's schedule. I'm not sure who they play because in the ACC, but I mean, I don't think they get North Carolina. There could also be a scenario for this, Marshall. So North Carolina, Notre Dame. Okay. Oh, what was that? Oh,
so their last 3 games, they're going down to Tallahassee. Then they have Pitt coming to them, and they're going to finish the season at Virginia Tech.
Virginia Tech could be a sneaky game because they got Khalil Herbert averaging 8.4 yards a carry, I believe, one of the best backs in the country. But I think a scenario here, Marshall, say Clemson loses to Virginia Tech and that's their second loss. But even Notre Dame losing to North Carolina on Black Friday, which I think is realistic, to be honest with you.
You think?
North Carolina, I mean, they put points on the board. Like, they really do. And I don't think – they're not a bad team. They're not a bad team by any stretch. I mean, they're not great, but they can certainly put Notre Dame on upset alert, I think.
Wow. I mean, I think – like, I think they're good, but it's like they dropped to Florida State and to Virginia. Like, they're just too inconsistent, I think, able to take down, like, a good program. Like, for other games, like Virginia Tech, they won, but it was like a shootout. Like they have a lot of games that are pretty tight. Boston College, they beat by 4.
It's true, yeah. So I mean, that's true. That's a good point. But again, I still think it's an upset alert game because like crazier upsets have happened this year. Namely, like you mentioned, Florida State, North Carolina. But if Notre Dame loses along the way, then you have pretty much an elimination game, the ACC title game. So. I think that's what I think.
This is kind of an interesting schedule. Now looking at a North Carolina schedule, so they have Wake Forest, then they have Notre Dame, Miami, and who is WCU?
Oh, that's Western Carolina. That's FCS school.
Oh, my bad. No disrespect to my Western Carolina people.
Go Catamounts.
I can kind of envision a scenario like, say North Carolina is able to upset Notre Dame, and then they're also able to then take that momentum, upset Miami, and then you're facing 2-loss North Carolina, and then you have one loss Clemson, one loss Notre Dame. Like maybe one of them drop another game. Or no, that would put Notre Dame at 2 losses. That would give North Carolina the advantage on them. That would put Clemson, North Carolina in the title game. That would be kind of interesting.
Okay, here are this scenario. So say Notre Dame drops a game and you have 3 1-loss teams at the top, because I don't know who Miami plays, because I forgot about Miami, if I'm being honest with you. Miami's
yeah, that's sneaky, dude. I didn't even realize that.
like they're playing great like football. Derek King is amazing. Like he picked up his 2018 form. But Miami
they're gonna finish
as well.
They might finish undefeated. They have Virginia Tech, but then they have Georgia Tech, Wake Forest, and UNC.
Yeah, exactly. So I mean, like, there's 3 playoff contenders. Like, and it's like we're saying, like, it's like the room is clogged. Like, I mean, the door is like it's crowded because you got the 3 ACC contenders. You got winner of the Pac-12 is USC, who showed some vulnerabilities against Arizona State. I hate to bring it up, Marshall. I'm sorry, but USC being one of the 2 ranked teams out of Pac-12. Out of the Pac-12, that's the other contender there. But again, the door's crowded with like those 5 schools now, and then if Oklahoma State somehow comes out with 1 loss, which I don't think is going to happen. Like I think Oklahoma's going to take them, or they lose in the Big 12 title game to Iowa State if Iowa State continues to win out. Like, I mean, the door's just really.
Yeah, dude, they're crowded over. So like looking at the ACC, for instance, right? We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 teams all within 2 games right there. Big 12, there's probably 5 teams within 5, 6 teams potentially within a shot. Like there is incredible parity right now. Incredible.
Yeah, exactly. Like, and that's something that ACC is known for. Like, especially like I think I mentioned. I don't know if I mentioned last podcast or just while we were talking Saturday, Marshall. But the ACC Coastal from 2013 to last season had 7 different winners. Every team in the division won the Coastal Division. And that's a testament to the parity of the Big 12 Coastal, or excuse me, Atlantic Coast Conference Coastal Division. So, I mean.
Now look at this. There's parity right now. I'm looking at the Big 10 as well. Big 10, we have Indiana 3-0, Ohio State 3-0, Maryland 2-1, Northwestern 3-0, Purdue 2-0. And then you have a sneaky Wisconsin in there at 1-0.
Wisconsin, I rule out Wisconsin because at most they're playing like 5 games with the Big 10 title game. So like they probably end up 6-0 at best. And Ohio State just had a cancellation too. So that's definitely a storyline to follow. If Ohio State gets a couple games canceled, like I don't think you put like 5-0 or 6-0 Ohio State in the playoff. Just because, I mean, the small size. I mean, for me, I wouldn't, because the sample size is small when you got like teams with like large.
That's a hot take.
I mean, it is hot, but it's a developing situation with like the cancellations. But if they end up playing like 5 regular season games, like 6-0, like if they lose a game against Indiana, like a resume building game against Indiana, or I'm trying to think of who else out of the East. Like they lost to Maryland. Maryland could have been a good resume builder, or like I don't think Michigan's a resume builder at this point.
No.
But like if they lose games like that, like it's almost like we're putting a brand name in here with a small sample size, and it's a dead giveaway.
I don't feel like they wouldn't do it though, honestly.
I mean, they would, yeah. I mean, I'd like to trust the College Football Playoff Committee as good people, but
for their evidence, they'll point to Kirk Herbstreit's rankings, where he constantly has Ohio State number 4, no matter how much they lose every game.
It's ridiculous. It really is. But we'll just have to see the playoff situation shape. This is, again, an unprecedented playoff race. And I just honestly, I want to get back to, normal playoff races. This is racking my mind, honestly.
What do you mean a normal playoff race? This is way better than a normal race.
I guess, man. I guess. But it's just like so many moving pieces. It's really wild. Like it really is.
Man, I just want to wave some tears really quick. Arizona State Sun Devils, 0-1. Shameful loss to USC. Oh my.
It's okay. It's because they weren't wearing the 75 throwbacks.
Dude.
Reason a loss.
For all those who did not catch the game, up 27-14. 3 minutes to go. In the final 3 minutes, give up 14 points, an onside kick, and you lose 28-27. I felt like someone reached into my chest, pulled out my still beating heart, and then fed it back to me with a fork and knife. That was tragedy.
And
Tragedy. And it was horrible too, because I feel like our guys were looking nice. And then, the worst part I think is the injuries. So it's almost like, Frank Darby, number one receiver, is out. We had some other significant injuries on the defensive side. I don't know the status of like Chase Lucas, for instance. Like, man, this is gonna be. It's almost like after one loss, you kind of have to rescind yourself back to like a rebuilding year. It's like,
oh yeah.
God, man.
I mean, again, like this year, I wouldn't put much stock in the pandemic here. Like because I feel it's gonna come with an asterisk, honestly. Whether it be, like I said, the small sample size or just like a team.
Hey, man, that ring is not gonna have an asterisk on it at the end of the year.
All right, man. Hey, well, at least you have hope. I mean, I don't know what else to say, but hey, best of luck, man.
It's a shame.
Well, I mean, if there's no more anything else to say, Marshall, any other thoughts on your Sun Devils? Or if I don't have any more thoughts, I'm kind of nervous for this Tulane game, Tulane Army this week. But we'll see how it goes. But until next time, next week we got some topics for you. We have a little bit of the Mac Brown effect with so many teams, bringing back old flames, sending you up texts or sending I miss you texts to their old coaches. And we'll analyze that theory. And other topics as well as New Mexico State. They're scheduling some games. We kind of don't know why.
You know what I saw? I saw today New Mexico State became the first college to license their mascot for liquor purposes. They have
Really?
Pistol Pete whiskey.
All right, I guess I'm trying that winter break then. I guess I'm getting the.
The bottling, it looks nice. It looks really nice.
I gotta check out a bottle then, man. I gotta check out the pictures. But
we're gonna have to mix that in with our Hennessy.
Yeah, for sure. Hey, I mean, yeah, like it's like a deadly combo, if I'm being honest. But until next, we'll see you, and peace, love, and soul.